So if you've ever wondered if there's a difference between the quality of a paid plugin versus a free plugin, this video should explain it all to you. So when I first started out mixing, I was using free plugins all the time, and the quality of my mixes were okay, but I wouldn't say they were amazing. But having paid plugins didn't necessarily change that instantly. So when I did go and buy my first paid plugins, they didn't suddenly fix all the problems. So from my experience, stock plugins can be amazing to start with as long as you know how to use them skillfully. So no matter what level you are as a music producer, if you know how to use your stock plugins inside out, you're going to get better results than just applying a paid plugin just for the hell of it. In my opinion, the only difference with paid plugins is they help you get a specific sound faster. So for example, the 1176 compressor is a famous sound. Everyone loves using it on their vocals in the industry, and it's just got a certain aggression to it that the plugin does a really good job at replicating. But in saying that, that's not the only way that you can get that exact same result. If you really wanted to, you could use the compressor in your DAW and likely get a very similar result. It's just about understanding what actually makes that sound how it is, and how can I use what I have to get to that sound. So stock plugins have been used on countless hits in the last 5, 10 or 15 years, including the likes of Billie Eilish's Ocean Eyes. Now Phineas has openly said before that he only ever used stock plugins in the entire session for Ocean Eyes. So I've actually got the session right here as well, as this was one of the demo projects from I think back in 2018 on Logic. And you can see here on the left side, we've got all these plugins, but none of these are plugins that are third party or sourced outside of Logic. So for example, we've got Space Designer, which is a reverb within Logic, obviously the channel EQ, which is just an EQ, and he's even used Alchemy, which is the built-in synth for Logic. So it sort of demonstrates my point that you don't necessarily need to have paid plugins to make a professional hit and make a song that gets billions of streams. And another example, I don't have the session for it, but the song Animals by Martin Garrix that I think he released back in like 2013 was pretty much made entirely with FL Studio plugins in FL Studio. And this song is now multi-platinum, and it's one of the best electronic songs to date. So anyone saying that you can't make a professional song with just stock plugins is lying to you. But the difference between stock plugins and paid plugins is that paid plugins have that sort of preset sometimes, or that specific sound that you might be after. So it generally enables you to get to that specific sound faster. It's not impossible to get that distinct sound, for example, of the 1176 or an SSL console or the Neve 1073. All these different replica plugins get to that sound really quickly. But if you really study the intricacies of the sound, use a spectrogram or frequency analyzer to have a look at what it's actually doing to the sound, you probably could get something very, very close. But of course, most people don't want to waste their time spending hours and hours trying to get that specific sound, so you just go buy the plugin because it's a lot easier and quicker. But my advice to you would be know the stock plugins in your DAW inside out before going to upgrade and buying these fancy paid plugins. And only once you realize, oh, I could really get that sound much quicker if I had the paid plugin, then you can buy the paid plugin. Or if there's a feature that they offer that you can't do in your DAW already, then go and buy it. Okay, so this track here is going to be my example to show these different plugins in action. So we're going to compare a stock plugin versus the paid equivalent versus potentially a free equivalent of the paid one. So it could be 2 or 3 comparisons per effect that we go through. And this song here is by a band called No Strangers. So I've mixed and mastered this one, or I'm still in the process of doing that. So we're just going to have a look and see how it sounds in terms of what they've done here. Okay, so let's just listen to the first part where the vocal comes in for the song to start with. So okay, so you get the idea. So what we're going to do now is start with no plugins at all and then see how these different plugins compare on that lead vocal. So, okay, so let's just listen to the raw vocal by itself now. So
you like to dance, oh man, you know she's heard it all before. You slide of hand, pretend romance, she'll take that drink and she's heading for the door. Yeah, she's heading for the door.
Okay, there you go. So if we now use, say, an EQ to start with, so we're going to start with the default channel EQ. So this is the stock EQ in Logic. If we start making some changes, we'll just see what happens.
So you like to dance, oh man, you know she's heard it all before. You slide of hand, pretend romance, she'll take that drink.
So, you know, we can do pretty much whatever we want with EQ. Nothing too crazy. Let's say we did something like that, just like for an example. And if we compare that now to the Pro Q4, which is probably the industry standard EQ, in terms of what the EQ does when it's boosting and cutting frequencies, it's going to have the same result. The difference is that this one has, say, a feature called dynamic EQ, where you can move this little parameter here, and what it will do is it will adjust accordingly to keep these levels more consistent. So if we look here,
you like to dance, oh man, you know she's heard it all before.
See, it's moving.
You sleight of hand, pretend romance. She'll take that drink and she's heading for the door.
So it's adjusting accordingly. So features like that, for example, can be really useful for keeping your EQ more consistent in certain areas. So if there was a lot of high end going on there, the EQ wouldn't move as much. But if there was less high end going on, it would compensate by moving more. Things like that can be really useful in these paid plugins. And then also in the Pro Q4, there's a cool feature called spectral analysis. So it sort of looks at every individual frequency and only boosts or cuts what's necessary there. So if we look at that again,
So you like to dance, oh man, you know she's heard it
you
over
can see that it's doing specific parts.
You sleight of hand, pretend romance. She'll take that drink and she's heading for the door.
Rather than kind of wide cuts. In terms of EQ, that's honestly probably the only difference. It really just comes down to functionality. So let's have a look at compression now. So this is the stock compressor in Logic again. This one we're going to use the Platinum Digital, which is sort of a modern sounding compressor. So
you like to dance, oh man, you know she's heard it all before.
See how we can get it to
Sleight of
sound.
hand, pretend romance. She'll take that drink and she's heading for the door. Yeah, she's heading for the door.
So it sounds pretty consistent, and it's got a certain sound to it, and obviously you can change that sound by changing the type of compressor as well. So let's just listen to some of these other ones.
You like to dance, oh man, you know she's heard it all before. You sleight of hand, pretend romance.
This one sounds a bit more punchy because it's probably the closest emulation to the 1176, which is the compressor we're going to use next, and that one that I was talking about before. So.
Heading for the door. Yeah, she's heading for the door.
It's quite aggressive compression if used effectively. So let's listen to that compared to the 1176 now. I'm going to use the Blue Stripe edition just because this is the one that I generally go towards. So maybe it's not a perfect comparison as this isn't an exact replica. If it was an exact replica, we'd be using probably this one here, but this one, funnily enough, was actually a free plugin. This one here, the 1176 FET. Actually, you know what? I'll use both. So I'll start off with the standard one, and then I'll compare it to that free one, which UAD gave away for a limited time a few months ago. So
you like to dance, oh man, you know she's heard it all before. You sleight of hand, pretend romance. She'll take that drink and she's heading for the door. Yeah, she's heading for the door.
So it sounds pretty much the same to me. Maybe it's a little bit more aggressive in the way it compresses, but again, with the right settings, you can probably get it to sound almost identical to that last compressor. It's just, it has those settings faster. Let's have a look at the FET compressor now, which is their free version of that one that I just had. So
you like to dance, oh man, you know she's heard it all before. You sleight of hand, pretend romance. She'll take that drink and she's heading for the door. Yeah, she's heading for the door.
So again, another pretty aggressive compressor, and nothing too crazy about this one. But it's kind of got that aggressive preset, you could call it, dialed in, rather than having to go through all the settings and get that yourself, which you would do with the stock compressor. So let's now compare reverb. So I'm going to start with Reverb because that's probably the most universal reverb in Logic. So let's just listen to what it sounds like with a bit of reverb on it.
You like to dance, oh man, you know she's heard it all before. You sleight of hand, pretend romance. She'll take that drink and she's heading for the door. Yeah, she's heading for the door.
So it sounds alright, and I mean, of course you could put this on a bus as well if you wanted to, but I'm just putting it directly here just for demonstration purposes.
You like to
so one more
dance,
time,
oh man,
we'll
you know
try a
she's heard it
different
all
one.
before. You sleight of hand, pretend romance. She'll take that drink and she's heading for the door. Yeah, she's heading for the door.
One more time, just with this chamber
you
setting
like
on.
to dance, oh man, you know she's heard it all before. You sleight of hand, pretend romance. She'll take that drink and she's heading for the door.
So it's pretty good. And again, it's got a specific sound to it, and that's based on the settings I've put in here. But if I use something like the Valhalla Vintage Verb, which is usually my go-to reverb plugin, you can see that it already starts to sound good from the get-go. So if I turn that mix down, because that would be really too much.
You like to dance, oh man, you know she's heard it all before. You sleight
So
of hand,
it's pretty good.
romance. She'll
But again,
take that drink and she's heading for the door.
It's just a reverb at the end of the day. It's a emulation of a sound space. So maybe they've done a slightly better job and you don't need to adjust it as much, but it just depends on the sound you're going for. There may be a really good kind of reverb in that Reverb plugin that you really want to use that sounds a lot better than this stuff. I just find for me personally that Valhalla Vintage Verb has a lot of presets that I really like, and it's pretty simple to look at, pretty easy to work with. But I still am confident that if I used Reverb, I could get the same results as I do in this. It just might take a little bit more time. So the last thing I'm going to compare is saturation. So we'll start off with the Magma BB Tubes. This is probably one of my favorite saturators, so let's just give it a listen.
So you like to dance, oh man, you know she's heard it all before. You slide up and pretend romance, she'll take that drink and she's heading for the door. Yeah, she's heading for the door.
So obviously a bit of distortion there, pretty gritty sound, but it's a decent sound and it adds a nice amount of harmonics and a bit of power and punch and warmth to the voice as well. So what I'm going to do now is show you the Logic stock one, which is called Chroma Glow. This is their saturator. It's one of the more new plugins that are built into Logic, but it sounds pretty good as well. So let's just give it a listen.
So you like to dance, oh man, you know she's heard it all before. You slide up and pretend romance, she'll take that drink and she's heading for the door. Yeah, she's heading for the door.
Sounds pretty good to me. And if we put on one of the different settings, say Retro Tube, we can listen to this now.
So you like to dance, oh man, you know she's heard it all before.
You can change the style too.
Pretend romance, she'll take that drink and she's heading for the door. Yeah, she's heading for the door. So you like to dance, oh man, you know she's heard it all before.
In terms of how they actually affect the sound, again, it's really similar. It's just you get that sort of preset or that ideal sound faster often with a paid plugin, but not all the time. So I'm going to leave it there, and my point to you and thing that I want you to take away from this is the best thing to do is to focus on using your stock plugins until you know them inside out, getting really familiar with them, knowing exactly how each feature works, and fully utilizing them before going and buying the paid stuff. Again, the paid stuff is great, but only if you actually have a need for it and a purpose for it through something that you can't get through stock plugins in your DAW. So another thing I just wanted to mention as per usual is the Music Production Academy. It's a great place to learn about mixing and mastering. I'll leave the link in the description. Do check it out. So hopefully that all makes sense. Do let me know in the comments what your thoughts are about stock plugins versus paid plugins and whether you agree or not with what I'm saying here. And do let me know as well if you have any free plugins that you really like or you really want to recommend to people. Leave them in the comments and I'll check it out. I'm sure other people will check it out too. So it can be a really useful resource for people as well. So that's all for today, and I will see you in the next one.